Okay, I think we're going to get started. We have 175 people here. We have about 250 signed up, but some of those people definitely signed up to make sure they would get the recording. So conscious of everyone's time, I think we will start. My name is Colleen Frawley, and I'm the new advocacy manager with Full Plates, Full Potential. And I'm just going to provide a short overview before we get into the meat of the webinar. Okay, so today we are going to start with introductions, and then we are going to have updates on what we know is happening with nutrition programs at the federal level and some at the state level. And then we're going to hear from our panelists about the impact of proposed cuts or changes to these programs in Maine. And then importantly, we're going to look at some things that we can do now together and as individuals, and we are going to answer questions the best we can. If you have questions in the chat, or not in the chat, sorry, if you can put them in the Q&A feature, we're going to use that, which is at the bottom of your toolbar on Zoom, and we're going to use that at the end as well. We will try to answer them as we go along. Whoever's not talking, we have Robin and Justin too from Full Plates, Full Potential, who are going to, keep an eye on those. And then we're going to try to leave time at the end. Thank you for submitting questions in advance when you registered. We've tried to cover, as the ones that we can and what we can answer in the presentation. Some of them we can't, we can't answer yet, but we'll do our best. So today on the panel, we have Anna Corson, the Policy and Program Director, Full Plates. Myself, we have George Fox, the Chief Supply Chain Officer from Good Shepherd Food Bank. We have Hannah Chattelbash, the Executive Director of Midcoast Hunger Prevention Program. Allison Levette, the President of Maine School Nutrition Association, and Jane McLucas, the Child Nutrition Director from the Department of Education. I also just wanted to add that Maine Equal Justice Partners had a conflict, and they would have been here to talk about Medicaid, so we will touch on that briefly. Okay, so we are here because of food insecurity in Maine. Just a reminder, I know we have people from school nutrition programs, we have people from farms, we have people from all over the kind of food system. So we're gonna just do like a quick overview about what we're talking about and why before we get into the impact of changes so that we're all on the same page. Maine has the highest rate of food insecurity in New England, and has the highest rate of childhood food insecurity in New England. So we have 1 in 5 children in Maine are food insecure. Our student population is just over 168,000 students. 57% of Maine children live in households with incomes below 185% of the federal poverty line. And as you can see, that has grown, that percentage has grown quite significantly. We serve a lot of school meals in Maine, over 29 million. We have 415 summer meal sites and 61 after-school meal sites. Since COVID-19 and school meals for all, we've seen a 25% increase in school meal participation in Maine. We have spent $968,000 on local foods during the 2023 to 2024 school year. About 100,000 Maine students out of 178,000 Maine students eat school lunch daily, which is a big number. And approximately 60,000 of those eat school breakfast daily. And just some other figures about SNAP, which is our supplemental nutrition assistance, which is given directly to families through an electronic benefit. We have 55,559 Maine children receiving SNAP benefits, and that's about 21% of children in Maine. So we are talking about federal nutrition programs today. and the proposed changes that we've heard a lot about in the news and through the budget process at the federal level, and how that's going to impact both families here and our programs. So what are we talking about? First of all, when we say Medicaid, Maine Care is Maine's Medicaid program. That's funded by federal and state funds, right? A combination. That covers roughly 30% of Mainers and 50% of Maine children. So that provides health insurance for a huge portion of Mainers. Why it's connected to federal nutrition programs, it qualifies families and children for free and reduced school meals and other programs that go along with it. And it streamlines that process. SNAP, that is a supplementary nutrition assistance program. And here you might, it used to be called food stamps. It's provided through the Pine Tree EBT card. And it is a direct amount of money for families to purchase food. It's funded through the USDA and it's managed by Maine DHHS. And as you'll see, these programs are funded and managed differently. So I'm just giving an overview. School meals, so on a federal level and on a Maine level, that's lunch, breakfast, after school, summer meals. The way it works is it's reimbursed by the USDA, but here it's managed by the Maine Department of Education. Currently, the funding is split between federal and state because of our universal school meals. So we apply and get money back for every meal from the federal government, and then the state pays the rest. So the Food Assistant Program, TEFAP, is a federal program that provides food banks with staple products to distribute to Mainers in need. So these all connect, and they all help feed Mainers. So that is what we're talking about today. I know there are other funding streams that have been impacted, and some of them they're not federal nutrition programs, and Anna and others might touch on them, but that is what we're focusing on here today because that's all we can do right now. And they are our biggest funder to fight food insecurity. Okay, I am going to hand it over to Anna.
Great. Thank you, Colleen. And thank you, everybody, for joining. It looks like we're up to 211 participants. That's a whole lot of people that really care about these programs. So just thank you to all for joining. I'm just going to pull up my notes because we have lots of updates to share, and I want to be as brief as possible. We've had a lot going on. Last week, as far as federal updates, Congress passed a spending bill that it's called a continuing resolution, or CR. That averted a government shutdown. So basically, it's keeping the government funded through this coming September. The CR did not include any cuts to federal nutrition programs, but it does allow more authority to the president and his administration to cut programs and funding. Congress also has been directed to balance the federal budget by making cuts to SNAP, Medicaid, school meals, other programs as well, but we're just going to talk about those today. And these cuts are to pay for increased military spending, border spending, and tax cuts to the wealthy. Clearly this administration's agenda includes cuts to SNAP and Medicaid with a really strong focus on work requirements. So this means that in order to receive benefits for food or healthcare, people have to be working. And this is problematic because study after study has shown that work requirements don't lead to increased income and food security. They instead are shown to increase poverty, increase food insecurity, and likely will drop many households from SNAP and Medicaid rolls. And we don't have more details yet about what those cuts to SNAP and Medicaid will look like, but we're following things very closely. We do have more details, however, about the cuts to school meal funding. So this would be done by rolling back the Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP. And so just very quickly, CEP is a program that allows high-need schools to offer breakfast and lunch to all their students at no charge using federal funds. It also eliminates the need to collect school meal applications every year, which reduces the administrative burden on schools and families. So rather than using individual student eligibility through school meal forms, school lunch forms, To determine the school meal reimbursements, CEP schools are reimbursed based on their percentage of poverty as determined by students' participation in other programs like SNAP, TANF, and here in Maine, MaineCare or Medicaid. So the proposal that we're hearing coming out of the federal government would roll back eligibility for the community eligibility provision from 25% of students living in poverty all the way to 60% of students living in poverty. It would also require every household that submits a school meal application to provide income verification. And this will really add undue burden on schools and families. These cuts are going to have a big impact on Maine schools. We know that participating in CEP increases efficiency for schools. It streamlines the eligibility process for school meals, and it also provides more accurate eligibility data and more accurate data around students who are living in poverty. So these cuts will, as I said, have a big impact on Maine. We're estimating that Maine will lose at least 10 million in federal funding just for school meals with this rollback. And that doesn't include any cuts to SNAP or Medicaid or the impact that we would see if households were no longer filling out school meal applications. So as far as the timing of all of this, it's still pretty unclear, but we expect that Congress and the administration will be getting back to work on balancing the federal budget and moving forward with some of these cuts over the next month or so, so spring into summer. And it's really, really important that they continue to hear from constituents that we strongly oppose these cuts. So it's important to keep up the advocacy at the federal level. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the webinar about how folks can take action. Also last week, USDA terminated the local food for schools and local food purchasing agreement. We're going to hear more about both of those important federal funding streams from Jane McLucas from DOE and also from George Fox from Good Shepherd very shortly. Before we do that, I just want to share some state updates as well. So at the state level, the legislature was unable to pass a supplemental budget, which basically would have added money to the current budget cycle. And one of the most important pieces of that was tied up in the supplemental budget was ensuring MaineCare payments to hospitals and healthcare facilities. So that did not pass. Now the legislature is working on a two-part budget for the next two-year budget cycle. So right now they're working on part one of that budget, which includes the additional funding for MaineCare that they were trying to include in the supplemental budget. And then otherwise, it's ongoing initiatives in this part one budget. So it would keep current programs at their current funding levels, and that includes school meals for all. And then part two of this budget will include additional funding and any new funding initiatives. And that will include the additional money that we need to keep school meals for all going. So the cost of school meals for all has continued to increase because we're seeing increased participation, and the federal cost per meal is also going up for school meals. So there's an additional $6 million in the budget for school meals for all. And that will be in part two of the state's budget. And School Meals for All is a really important program here in our state. It passed with very strong bipartisan support in our state legislature. Unfortunately, we are starting to see that bipartisanship unraveling at the state level, and we're really concerned that a drop in support as far as bipartisan support for this policy, combined with the federal cuts to these programs, will threaten our School Meals for All policy. So now is the time to start reaching out to state legislators and let them know how important School Meals for All is to you and to your school and to your community. And again, later in the webinar, I'll share more about how folks can do that. And then just very quickly, Full Plates and our partners have been advocating strongly against these cuts. We've been reaching out to our members of Congress. We sent them a sign-on letter that was signed by 79 organizations opposing these cuts. Maine School Nutrition Association was in DC last week, and Good Shepherd Food Bank was in DC the week before that, meeting with our members of Congress. And then we're also working at the state level with state legislative leadership and the administration to secure Maine School Meals for All policy. So we've been very busy, and we know you all have been too. So I think now we're going to turn it over to some other panelists. I think Jane, you're up first to talk about the local food. Oh, well, first, how do we know all of these things that are happening federally? I think this is really important. So we have national partners who are on the ground in DC talking with members of Congress on a daily basis, probably on an hourly basis at this point. So they really know what is happening, what's being discussed, and which programs are under threat. This was also all spelled out in Project 2025, which is basically this administration's roadmap for policy change. And also, the House Ways and Means Committee had a document that outlined these specific cuts to SNAP, school meals, and Medicaid and other pieces. And then there's been a lot of media coverage about these proposed cuts. So this is where all of that information is coming from. And now we're going to move on to our other panelists. So first we'll hear from Jane at the DOE about the local Food for Schools funding that was just cut. So we can move to the next slide.
Hi, everybody. So unfortunately, we did receive notification on March 7th that the local foods for schools and childcare facilities did expire, and they will no longer be funding that program. We were very disappointed in that news, because the state of Maine school nutrition programs use 95.4% of the local foods for schools program last year. And it was used by 119 districts in all 16 counties here in Maine, which we're really proud of. Top items that were bought with that money would be apples, proteins, potatoes, tomatoes, and root vegetables. So we did do really well using up those funds, and very sorry to see local foods for schools and childcare facilities go away. But just a little reminder that our state local foods fund is still available for all the schools to use and continue to use in the future. And you can go on from here, Anna.
Thank you, Jane. And this will also have an impact on all the farms that we're working with schools. So it's really going to have an impact on our local economy as well. Okay, so next up, we have George Fox from Good Shepherd Food Bank. Thanks for joining us, George.
All right. Thank you, Anna. I'm here to talk about TEFAP today. And for people that aren't as familiar with the USDA acronyms, TEFAP, as it says on the slide, is the Emergency Food Assistance Program. TEFAP is administered by the Food and Nutrition Services Division of USDA. And the reason that that's important is FNS is particularly focused on the food systems within the country. And TEFAP has been founded, or was founded, with two goals. One was to provide food access to people with low incomes. And at the same time, it was intended as a way to provide price stability for the agricultural producers. So whenever you're looking at TEFAP and what's taking place in terms of funding and policy and things like that, good to keep in mind, it's actually got dual purposes. There are two primary funding sources that drive TEFAP spending. One is entitlement, which can be thought of as kind of the baseline funding for TEFAP. And entitlement funding is relatively stable and predictable, and it kind of forms the baseline of food that becomes available. The other source of funding are various bonus streams, which are more variable and typically respond to stabilizing pricing for agricultural commodities. In the past administration, there also was a significant infusion of funding flowed through the Credit Commodity Corp, or the CCC, and is this CCC funding that we're seeing getting rolled back most recently. So what do we know about the CCC rollback? We found out about 10 days ago that about 29 loads of food that had been scheduled for delivery from April through June have been paused with the expectation that these loads are likely to be canceled. Well, what does 29 loads mean in the scheme of things? So 29 loads of food is about 1 million pounds of food that we would distribute out to network partners across the state. And to put a little context around that, TEFAP makes up about 10 million pounds of food that we distribute each year, which is about 20% of our total distribution. So 1 million pounds over a 3-month period is being paused and is likely headed for cancellation out of what we would typically see as a 10 million pound annual program. So not catastrophic, but certainly impactful, and certainly reduces kind of baseline food availability for our emergency food partners. I noticed earlier when I looked at the attendees to the meeting that some of our State Department of Ag, Conservation and Forestry partners were planning to attend, and I'm not sure how many are here in the meeting. I do want to call out Gus Nelson and Jimmy Durda as a couple of the DACF folks that we work very closely with TEFAP, and I know Gus and Jimmy are actively working to find either ways that we can make more product available to try to offset some of the million pound cancellation, or to at least find ways to move product around so we get a more consistent flow of food available to distribute to our emergency food partners. DACF is a strong partner in the work that we do with TEFAP and in other USDA programs. And I just want to show some appreciation for, the state agency really digging in here and trying to help us solve this problem. At this point, it's uncertain what is going to happen after June. We've been notified about this million pound cancellation or apparent cancellation from the period of April through June. We're concerned that there may be further impacts as you get further out into the calendar year. But at this point, that's really unknown. And like many of us, we're kind of trying to react to the steadily evolving information to see what the future holds beyond that. And with that, I guess that's my update on TEFAP, and glad to respond to any questions in the Q&A or afterwards.
Thank you, George. Yeah, so now we're going to hear from Hannah Chattelbash from Mid-Coast Hunger Prevention Program.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me. So I think one thing that we have to step back and look at is, why are there so many people in Maine who are food insecure and might need to visit a food pantry? Why does this problem exist here? We have an abundance of food, but people can't access that food. And the reason that they can't access it is simply because they can't afford it. Food insecurity in Maine is a symptom of poverty, and there are wide swaths of our population that are struggling financially. You can see from this chart from United Way, Alice, these are households who are asset limited, income constrained, and employed. They're households that are working, but maybe at minimum wage or just above, not a lot of assets in the bank. They are struggling, financially struggling to make ends meet. And when they are struggling to make their household budget work for their family, they often turn to food pantries for support. So you can hit that next slide. So this is the picture at MCHPP. And we are seeing exponential growth in access to our food pantry year over year. So you can see that the growth from 2019 to 2023 is roughly equal to the growth that we saw from 2023 to 2024. And that is reflective of the fact that wages are too low and cost of living is too high here in our state. So what does it mean when federal benefits get cut for families? It simply means that there are fewer dollars in their pocket, and they are going to be looking to the Charitable Food Network to fill that gap. A really great example of this actually is when you look at this graph in 2021, you might say, hey, why does it look like you had a little bit of a dip there in 2021? Well, that's because the federal government actually stepped up in a positive way in 2021. That was when we saw stimulus payments from the federal government, when we saw the expanded child tax credit, which put extra dollars in the pockets of families with kids. The maximum benefit for SNAP benefits was increased in a really significant way. Unfortunately, we rolled back all those changes from 2021 through 2023. And as you've seen, the numbers reflect that people are really at this point relying heavily on the Charitable Food Network in order to make ends meet. Unfortunately, I don't see that changing with all these these cuts that are coming down the pike. And as you just heard from George, food pantries are also being squeezed from the other direction. So as our client service numbers are increasing, we're accessing less food from the federal government. And it's just an incredibly unsustainable picture that I think is going to put a lot of food pantries into crisis mode. I'm sorry to paint such a dire picture, but I'm afraid to say it just doesn't look good at this point. Thankfully, the Charitable Food Network, all of the organizations like Mid-Coast Hunger Prevention Program are very nimble, very responsive to need, and will do the absolute best that we can to continue to meet growing need within the community. But like I said, there are certainly some challenges ahead.
Thanks, Hannah. Okay, and now Allison Levitt from Maine School Nutrition will share how these cuts will impact schools and school nutrition programs.
Hi, everyone. Allison Levitt, president of Maine School Nutrition Association, also a nutrition director in Lisbon, and I have been for over 10 years now. So I will say in the last 5 years, we have been fortunate enough to go from families paying for meals to having school meals for all in the state of Maine, and what a difference it has made on all of our programs. I know just here in Lisbon, we're feeding many more kids breakfast and lunch. We know, and research shows, that the healthiest meals kids are eating are at schools, and we are fortunate to be able to do that for them. As you can see in the picture below, that was just not, I think that was almost exactly a week ago today. We were in DC meeting with our legislators. We had some great meetings. We had some tough conversations, but I think for the most part, everybody is on board with school meals and feeding students, but it's a very tricky kind of whatever. It's tricky. So what I want to say is that we have come so far, and we are so fortunate to be able to do this and to have all of these local funds to provide amazing food for our students. We've been able to take away from the administrative part and focus on trying new things, bringing in local foods. And now, and I always prided myself on being able to tell anyone that doesn't know a lot about school nutrition that we have free meals in Maine. It is in statute. It's not going away. And this is the first time that and I know my colleagues are scared that, wow, maybe this is going to go away. And the thought of going back to the administrative burden of the paperwork, we currently right now, for anyone that collects income applications, we have to verify a certain percentage. In my district, that only comes out to be about 3 applications. Of those 3 applications, I'm lucky if one of them responds. So thinking about every single family that is going to have to fill out one of these applications, A, I don't think they're going to do it. B, why do you want to send all of your financial information to your child's school? It's a big ask, and yeah, it's just a lot of a burden in that aspect. And I think many of us are very nervous about our ability to continue to feeding kids at the rate that we are feeding them right now with the nutritious food that we're feeding them due to the wonderful funds that we've had the access to. And um, there's a lot unknown. I mean, I know I can speak on behalf of my colleagues that will do whatever we need to do to feed our students in Maine, but we are concerned with the added paperwork. If CEP goes down or goes up, but goes down, and what that's going to mean for our students. And it also doesn't even take into consideration the number of schools in Maine that plan to enroll in CEP this fall, myself included. So there is a lot of unknown, but I think as long as we do what we can, we'll make it through just like we always have.
Thanks, Allison. There's a couple questions about, have you heard anything about lower reimbursement rates when you're in DC or mostly CEP?
We didn't talk about reimbursement rates, so we don't know what that is at this moment.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, this is certainly the first time that our school meals for all policy has felt under threat, and that is really scary. But it's also very heartening to see so many people on this call. And I think if we're all raising our voices to oppose these cuts and show our support for these programs, that will have a big impact. So again, just grateful that everybody's here. Before we start talking about how you can all help, and before we get to answering some questions, there's been some great questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I just want to share just a few final thoughts about the impact that these cuts will have on the state. So clearly, these programs cost a lot of money, and if the federal government cuts funding to these programs, the cost will shift to the state. And the state budget we just can't afford these cuts. We can't shoulder these cuts. As you heard, the Food Pantry Network cannot shoulder these cuts either. They're already working really hard to meet the current need, which has been growing. So we were not in a good situation to begin with. So just very quickly, looking at the impact this could have, we have over 179,000 Mainers who rely on SNAP. And SNAP generates $364 million in economic activity in Maine. So this will hurt households, it'll hurt individual people, and it will hurt our local economy as well. As far as the CEP rollback, we're looking at 392 schools that would no longer be eligible to participate in CEP. That leaves only 31 eligible schools who might be able to participate. And if we see cuts to SNAP and Medicaid, people will start falling off of the SNAP and Medicaid rolls. And if school districts start losing kids who are automatically eligible through SNAP and Medicaid, they could easily not be eligible for CEP either. So that 31 eligible schools could drop, that number could drop as well. And then, as I mentioned before, Maine is going to lose at least $10 million in funding just for school meals alone. And that doesn't take into account any of these other cuts. So we've just painted a really bleak picture, and we don't want to leave you just feeling doom and gloom and helpless. What can you do to help right now? How can you all raise your voices? So we do have some calls to action, and we have some resources to support you all to do some advocacy. So I know we have a lot of people from different areas and sectors on the call. So we have ways that everybody can take action. So we'll start with how schools can take action. So if you are representing a school, please reach out to your state legislator and tell them how important School Meals for All is to you and your school and to your students, and the impact that it's been having in your school community. We're also gathering stories and figures of how these cuts will impact schools. So we want to hear, how it supports students, how it's changed your job if you work in a school kitchen or if you're a teacher, and also how these cuts could actually impact your budget. So if you are able to calculate the actual impact, please share that with us. We have put together a very short form that you can fill in, and I believe that Robin is going to put a link to that form in the chat. So we appreciate you all sharing what you can. Also, if you're a school, please continue to reach out to Maine's members of Congress and tell them you oppose these cuts and how they'll be impacting your school here in Maine and your work. And if you have numbers you can share, that is really helpful as well. And then if you do work in a school kitchen, if you're a school nutrition professional, we are looking for folks to serve on an advisory group that will help to guide our work moving forward. And so there's going to be a link in the chat for the interest form. So we'd love it if you would join our work. If you are here representing a food pantry, please continue to reach out to your state and federal representatives and let them know how these cuts are going to impact your pantry and the people that you serve. Hannah did a great job highlighting how what they've been seeing at Midcoast Hunger Prevention. If you are a farm or if you have a grocery store, please share how cuts to SNAP will impact your business. Maine's members of Congress want to hear from you. The economic impact is really important here. And then for everybody on the call, right now, it's really important that you contact your state legislators and share why School Meals for All is important and the impact it's having on you, on your household, on your community, on your kids, anything you can share that you feel comfortable sharing. And also please contact Maine's members of Congress, share your stories with them, talk about school meals, talk about SNAP. They just really need to hear from people why these programs are important and the impact cuts would have. And as I mentioned, we do have resources to support your advocacy efforts. So we have created a Take Action page where you can find ways to contact your state and federal representatives. So if you don't know who they are, there's a link to find them. So you put in your address and you can find who represents you. We also have talking points and data. This webinar recording will be posted to that page as well. We also have a newsletter, and you can subscribe to that for updates and future opportunities to take action. I encourage everybody to sign up for that. And please reach out to us at Full Plates if you have any questions or if you would like any help or support with any of your advocacy efforts. We are always happy to help with that. And if you're a school trying to figure out, the impact, the financial impact on your district, we can try to help with that as well. Okay, that's a lot. We've just shared a ton of information with all of you. So I think now we're going to answer some questions. So if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A and we can answer we'll answer what we can today.
I'm just going to jump in because someone asked about the timeline of proposed changes. And, if this happens, will we have to start collecting income, get school meal applications in the middle of the year? We don't know. But so what we're looking at right now at the federal level is probably committees are going to be asked to mark up and say how much needs to be cut from which program before August, before that break. So we're talking like April, May, where some of these decisions will start coming out, and then they need to be voted on by both the House and the Senate. So there's still time, to let our delegation here in Maine know the stories of the impact. And certainly none of them want to pass this on to us, but how much power or what they're going to do is a different question. But so perhaps we won't have these changes next school year, but we don't know. And I mean, as we can see from the speed that things change, things like CEP, they don't require a law change to change the program. And some of these changes don't. So that could mean it comes in faster than, it could be mid-year, I guess, is unfortunately the answer. Does someone want to just talk a little bit about summer meal programs that impact for summer 2025, what we know?
All I can say is I haven't heard of anything at this moment. Who knows, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, there is so much uncertainty, and for this summer, the eligibility numbers are based on this school year's data. So we should expect that anyone who is eligible to operate a summer meal program this summer based on the current data should go ahead and plan to operate a summer meal program. I think that the concern would be moving forward if these changes happen federally, if they roll back CEP, if they make cuts to SNAP and Medicaid, then it's likely that we will see fewer eligible summer meal sites across the state, which is very concerning. The out of school time food insecurity rate is always larger. We know kids lose access to school meals, and so summer meals are very important. So that is a great question. I'm looking through the questions in the chat. It looks like Good Shepherd's been doing a great job of answering a lot of the questions directed at you all. And it looks like this is not a question, but I don't think that everyone participating in the webinar can see what's in the chat. So we might need to put the links into the Q&A. All right, let's see. There's a question about how cuts to, let's see, I want to get to the top of the questions. There's a question about the total amount spent on school meals versus the 968,000 spent on local food. Yes, so Maine, in the Maine budget, it's around $60 million spent on school meals, and then the federal government matches that with slightly less. It's around 53 million that the state receives in federal funds. And we were expecting that to shift where the federal government would be spending more and the state would be spending less, because more schools were going to be able to participate in the community eligibility provision next year. So, you know, not only are we concerned about these cuts because of the current schools that would be, you know, dropped off of CEP, but also next year, all of the schools that would have been able to participate will not be able to. So I hope that answers the question about the total amount spent there. There's a question about how these SNAP cuts apply to licensed child care sites. Matthew, I'm wondering if you're asking about the local food for schools money. This year was the first year that the federal government was providing money through the local food for schools program to childcare. So that no money has gone to childcare yet. It would have been going this next year. So they will not be receiving that, which is too bad. There's a question about if the WIC program is affected by these cuts. My understanding is that WIC was actually the only program that had an increase in funding in the budget bills that were being worked on at the federal level. Those have not passed, so there have not been increases to WIC funding, but it seems like people are working hard to protect WIC. Any other questions?
And I just want to, this is Justin, I just want to let folks know if you are having trouble getting the links, fullplates.org/townhall has all of this, has all the links on it. It will also have the recording as soon as the recording is available. And we'll also be emailing everything out to folks who attended. So we'll get it to you, I promise. Sorry for technical difficulties. We'll get better at this.
Did they, when Robin sent them to everyone in the chat, and did people still not get them, the links? I'm just curious.
All right, we will make sure you all get the links if you don't have them. There is a question in the chat regarding advocacy. As our representatives and senators seem to be fighting for us, what will our continued outreach do? Does it help them to hear from us? It does. So they need our stories, and they need Maine specific stories and Maine specific numbers. So the more that they hear from us, they can have conversations with their colleagues who might not be in support of supporting SNAP and school meals and these other important programs. So the more that we can reach out and share our stories and share how these programs impact us and how the cuts would impact us, the better. And it really helps our representatives do their job well. So they need to know that this matters to their constituents because their job is to represent us. So that is a great question.
And they particularly would like to hear from farms, stores, people that own stores, retailers, and families individually, along with schools, or people that would be willing to put their, names and stories. And so the link that we shared to collect stories, if you want to, or you can email us whenever, wherever, but if you're willing to do that, stories definitely go further than pages of statistics.
And Amy's asking, can we get a list of which farmers are directly affected by this? I don't know that, Full Plates does not have that list. I don't know if Good Shepherd has a list of farmers that they could share. There might be a way to collect this information, but I'm not aware of it. I know that MOFGA, the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, has been working with a lot of their network of farmers with a lot of the other federal funding freezes that are happening. So if we are able to get a list, we will certainly share it out with this whole group. And Stormy, thank you for your support. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate all the work that you do as well. And there's a question from Mark. Is Catholic Charities also affected, as we also get a lot of food from them as well? This might be a question for Good Shepherd.
Yeah, I'll grab that one, Anna.
Thanks.
To the extent that TEFAP food distributions will go down statewide, yes, Catholic Charities will be impacted by that, along with all of our other food partners. So unfortunately, the answer to that is yes, they will be.
And then there's a question, will CSFP be affected? Not familiar with that acronym, but I bet that's another one for you, George.
Yeah, it is. At this point, it appears that the funding for CSFP is progressing as expected. So no bad news regarding CSFP at this point. So keep your fingers crossed.
This is a great question, I think, to end our webinar with. What is giving us all hope in this moment, and what potential solutions are we leaning into? I can start by saying everyone joining this call is giving me hope, and just knowing that we're all working together to protect these programs gives me a ton of hope. And so we're really leaning into advocacy and supporting other folks to be advocates as well.
Can I jump in one little thing? I just wanted to say, after we had our visits in Washington last week, we did have a couple of our senators in Congress reach out to us directly asking for stories from Maine, which we collected and we sent back to them. And then they created drafts that they were sending out to the USDA and to other people. So when you say, does it make a difference? It absolutely makes a difference. So keep up the good fight, and people are on our side and doing what they can to get this funding reinstated. And I think it is a lot of doom and gloom, but there is hope.
We just heard that our senator, I think it was Senator King's office, is getting like 5,000 calls a day from Mainers. So that gives me hope that people are sharing their stories and are interested in governance in a way they haven't been in a long time. And then also a representative in the House. Sorry, Nancy, I did try to spell most of the acronyms out on the slides. So when you get the slides, you'll have those. But oh, in the chat, yeah, I know. A representative in the House got more calls, I think, last week than he did the whole year before. That not a main one, but so it is good. That's giving me hope that the people that we elect are being held to account in some way by us.
Hannah or George, you want to share anything that's giving you hope to close us out?
What gives me hope? What gives me hope is, while the federal government is very important in what we do, we have other partners that we depend on day in, day out, year in, year out, and seeing a lot of interest from other partners in trying to step up and help us meet the need. So the federal government's important, but they're not the only partners we have. So hopefully others will do even more than they typically do.
I think what gives me hope is just getting to see the daily interactions between volunteers and service users and staff members and general community, and just understand that even if there are some of these large, at times feeling very incomprehensible and unsolvable problems in the world, at a community level, we operate with a considerable amount of kindness and dignity and care for one another.
Thank you for that question, Lucy. That was a really good way to end this, because I know a lot of us are feeling hopeless right now with a lot of the bad news that's coming out. George, there's one question in the chat in the Q&A about TEFAP donations. So I don't know if anybody from your team can answer that one. And then we also have another one about less food donations coming from some of the big grocers. I'm wondering if that's related.
Regarding donations that are TEFAP satellite sites, if the question is regarding other food donors or other monetary donors, we're optimistic that people will see the drop off in the federal supports and respond even more generously than they typically do. So yeah, we're hoping that food donors and monetary donors will help offset some of this. And regarding seeing less food from Hannaford Shaw's Walmart, I think grocers right now are dealing with some of the economic uncertainty in the same ways that we are. And I think for what we're seeing, the grocers are trying to figure out what's going to be the impact of everything that's taking place out there on people's buying habits. And so we are seeing some disruption in the daily and weekly food donations that we've been receiving. And I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. Hopefully it's a short-term disruption and not anything any longer than that, but it may take some time to play out.
Thanks, George. Okay, it looks like we've gotten to the end of our questions. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if the questions are for any of our panelists, we'll make sure to connect with them to get answers. And thank you all for your advocacy. It's really important in this moment. Again, we'll be sending out links so that you can take action and find your local reps and your federal reps. And we'll be sharing this recording as well. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you raising your voices. It's critical in this moment. And please let us know if you have further questions or need any help from us. Thank you.